It was December the 1st in 1991. Tommy Burkett was a junior at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia, and he was visiting home after the Thanksgiving holiday. His parents lived around 20 miles from the university campus, and Tommy's parents were out for most of the afternoon. They left around 2:45 to attend a poetry reading. However, they returned home around 10 minutes past 6, and they ended up discovering something unimaginable. In today's episode, we will be discussing and talking about the mystery of Thomas Calvin Burkett. Hey, I'm your host, Benjamin Bryan, and you're listening to Pieced, a Create Network production. The night before, on the 30th of November, 1991, 21-year-old Thomas Burkett left his parents' home in Fairfax County and was visiting his old high school friends in Centerville, Virginia, which was around 7 miles from his parents' house. He ended up arriving around 8 p.m. and then left around 4 hours later at midnight on December the 1st and was seen on CCTV stopping by an ATM machine where the camera recorded Tommy withdrawing money and also being approached by 3 white males. It was around 2 a.m. when Tommy called his parents, letting them know that he was staying over at his friend's house. He also made his parents aware that he would be home around noon the next day, so he could attend the family's scheduled outing, which was a poetry reading. Around 11:45 on December the 1st, Tommy's parents left the house to run an errand, but while they were leaving, they heard squealing tires, and they were not able to see any cars in sight. However, it was confirmed by witnesses that the car Thomas drove, which at the time was a blue Mustang, was seen being chased by a large dark car, and once his parents returned home, they found out Tommy was not home still, which they found quite surprising, as he said he would be home by noon. So Beth and Tom Burkett, his parents, waited for him until 2:45 in the afternoon, but then decided to leave for the poetry reading event that Thomas Burkett was supposed to go to, as he had promised his parents he would. While his parents were away, there was a dark sedan, which was occupied by a white male, which was parked 3 houses down from the Burkett's drive. The dark sedan stayed there for around 20 minutes. However, later on in the afternoon, the same car was seen parked in front of the parents' house, with the car being unoccupied at the time, and no lights on inside the house. Now, a few hours later, around 10 minutes past 5, neighbours saw Tommy's blue Mustang, to which the car then came to a stop. The driver, who was an unidentified white male, like previously, idled the car. As there were neighbours around, the driver decided to wait until all the neighbours had gone inside the house. An hour later had gone by. It's now 10 minutes past 6 in the evening. Beth and Tom Burkett returned home and they noticed the unoccupied Mustang that was parked in front of the house, assuming and indicating that their son had returned home and was inside the house, which he was. However, upon entering the home, they looked for their son, and Tommy's father found his son's dead body, which was sitting upright on the sofa in his bedroom, facing towards the door, with his feet being crossed at the ankles and his hands laying on his lap, with a revolver resting in his hands. Thomas Burkett had been shot once through the mouth, and his body showed signs of being beaten up or beaten to death. His jaw had been savagely broken, with his right ear apparently being, and I quote, a bloody mess of tissue. When his father found him, he started to observe his son's torn clothing, along with multiple cuts and bruises. With the revolver being in Thomas's hand, his father also noticed a gunshot wound to the head, and shortly after this, the father quickly called 911, and this is where it gets interesting. So, at some point, Tommy's father picked up the revolver, and he was surprised to find that the gun's cylinder was unlatched, and according to the father, the gun could not have been fired in that condition. There was a total of 2 rescue vehicles seen heading towards their house with their sirens on, and apparently witnesses saw the first ambulance turn down a street adjacent to Merkirk Lane and stopped by the curb, and apparently they saw people get out of the vehicle and retrieved something from a small ravine, and then continued to drive slowly away without their sirens on. Then the second ambulance comes into the equation and proceeds to the Burkett's house, and they examined Tommy's body and advised that their son had been dead for several hours, and apparently, against the procedure, they left both the body and the scene. Shortly after 20 minutes past 6, the moment the police arrived at the scene, they insisted that their son Tommy had committed suicide. However, Beth and Tom Burkett believed their son was murdered, and Beth's suspicions began immediately. Now, before the lead detective arrives, a police officer from Fairfax County Police arrived in a hurry, according to the mother, and without even seeing the crime scene or looking at the body, the uniformed officer said, and I quote, "College students kill themselves all the time, and don't blame yourself." So this officer, bear in mind, has just arrived and already came to the conclusion that he committed suicide without any investigation. But a few moments later, the lead detective arrives and soon emerged an old bank deposit slip, and written on the back was, "I want to be cremated." Beth was convinced the handwriting on the back of the deposit slip was not her son's. However, the lead detective also mentioned that the alleged suicide just happened despite being told otherwise. With all of this taken into account, according to the police, the facts spoke for themselves. This was an open and shut case of suicide. However, the parents believed otherwise, thinking that their son had been murdered, as there are a few unanswered questions surrounding this case. It wasn't just the unlatched gun. Along with this suspicious note, Tommy had glasses which were missing, along with his wallet and driver's license. Now, apparently the police didn't take proper care, and no attempt was made by the police to preserve the crime scene, and there was no police tape put up. The scene was not photographed, and there was no samples of blood taken, and the pattern of the blood spatter was inconsistent with where the body was. There was a bullet from the wall behind Tommy's head, which was not removed for ballistics, and apparently the gun was not even examined, and the neighbourhood was not even canvassed for witnesses, and when they did approach the officers, they apparently were told that they did not want to hear it. 2 days after their son's death, his parents went down to his dorm room at Marymount University to collect his belongings, and this is when they were given Tommy's driving license. However, the school administrators would not provide any information about how they got it or the students who had turned it in. And with all of this adding to the list of unanswered questions, Tommy's parents decided to talk to the neighbours to see if they noticed anything during this unimaginable day. After they spoke with their neighbours, Beth was stunned by what people had seen and mentioned. Several neighbours reported seeing Tommy's car being chased by a larger, darker car. One neighbour saw the cars coming and he thought, "This is serious. It's life or death." Another neighbour reported that one of the cars involved in the case at one point drove through someone's lawn. Tommy's car was apparently run off the road and he was assaulted. He got away from his attackers and made it back to our house. Now, a few weeks later, Paul Kish was hired by Tom and Beth, who was a bloodstain expert based in New York. This happened because Beth noticed a spray of small reddish marks on the stairway in their home, and they did inform the authorities, but no official investigation occurred. Now, Paul Kish confirmed the spots were blood and mentioned that it's not consistent with committing suicide in a room, sitting on a sofa. Some other violent altercation took place where blood was shed, with a lot of energy being exerted towards the bullet like a gunshot. As a result of this, Tom and Beth decided it would be best to have their son's body exhumed for a second autopsy. The new findings revealed that Tommy had unexplained abrasions, bruising on his right ear, and had a broken jaw, all of this adding to the suspicion that he was murdered. With all of the additional information that has been found, this information caused the mother, Beth, to call the local dispatcher to find out if her son had contacted 911 on the day he died. Now, Beth managed to find that Tommy made 2 complaints, one in August and the other one in November. However, when asked the nature of the complaints, the dispatcher changed her story and said Tommy never called. Here's what was said based on the call log. Well, on the computer screen, it shows his name and the time that he called, and then he made 2 consecutive calls, but the message has been deleted. So she was gone for several minutes, but said, "I don't know why his name is on the computer, but he didn't call 911. Now, this just adds to the confusion. However, in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that aired on the 11th of November 1994, Beth said this: "I know Tommy made those calls because the police department personnel told me. I know this to be a fact. I am angry every day of my life. I wake up angry every morning that this police department did not respond to the 911 calls. However, if those calls were made to the police, why did no one respond? Were the phone records erased, or was it done on purpose? I guess these are just some of the questions that will not be answered. Now, with his parents still trying to understand the mystery behind their son's death, they started to re-examine everything, leading up to the unimaginable event. So, less than 3 weeks before Tommy died, he made a phone call to his mother, explaining that someone had broken into his mailbox and stolen his paycheck, and apparently sounded quite frantic on the phone. Not only that, but according to Beth, Tommy was assaulted by a student a few days after the phone call, and this was the same student who had his driving license. However, during his fall semester, he was repeatedly harassed by students, Philip Howley, whose father was a police officer, and Donald McEwen, whose father was a trustee at the university. Now, these harassments ranged from theft to vicious assaults, but just over 2 weeks before his death, Philip Howley beat Tommy up so badly that his swollen face was unrecognizable. Now, apparently an informant claimed that Tommy was attacked because he was an undercover DEA agent, and Tommy was potentially aware of some drug activities going on at the university campus, and was going to expose their drug activities. This informant also claimed that Tommy was beaten to death with a baseball bat, and that the phone books were used to minimize the bruising and absorbed the blood spatter, which lines up with what Beth has said. The story fit in with everything we had noticed and could not account for. During the previous months, for example, we had noticed our phone books were missing the week after Tommy died. Also, there had been a baseball bat in Tommy's bedroom, and the gripping tape had been stripped off the bat. Despite all the efforts from his parents, they were not able to confirm whether he was murdered. Although I personally do think he was murdered just due to the anomalies throughout the case and the unanswered questions throughout the case, it just doesn't seem to fit in with the whole timeline. This unexplained death remains unsolved for the parents, and law enforcement still class this case as a suicide. His parents sadly died without learning the truth of their son's death. His father passed away in 2006, and Tommy's mother, Beth, sadly died of cancer 3 years earlier in 2003. They were convinced that their son was murdered, however, due to the authorities not carrying out the investigation properly, resulted in a lot of unanswered questions that does not point to suicide. That's all for episode 7 about the unsolved mystery surrounding Thomas Burkett's death. Please make sure to leave a review and share it with someone you know who is interested in true crime, mysteries, and much more. Don't forget to follow our social media, which is PeastPod. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next month for another episode of Peast.